Order for Monday, November 20th, 2023.
Hey.
Ha, look at that.
Oh, there you made it.
We'll have a roll call of members, please.
Leaders.
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Chapman.
Here.
Silkworth.
Here. You've had a chance to read the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes or make any corrections?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. Upon hearing that, I'd ask for a motion to open up the public hearing on our case for the day. I've got to look up this number.
You want to read
Read the statement.
Read your statement.
I got to read the statement first. Now, one of these days, I'm going to not have to read the statement.
Go start here.
I tried to get like a pre-recorded version of it to.
Yeah. I was wondering if we could edit it down.
Probably not.
Where's you out after reading it?
All right. The public hearings will be conducted pursuant to the Commissioner's Rules of Procedure. We will first hear the report of the Planning Director on the detailed information and observations regarding their request before the Commission, if not done so in written form prior to the hearing. Next, we will take the testimony of the applicant and his or her witnesses. Upon completion of the applicant's testimony, I will call upon members of the audience wishing to be heard concerning the request. Persons in favor of the request shall be heard first, followed by those opposed to it. At any time during the presentation of testimony, the members of the Commission may interrupt to ask questions or to make comments on what has been said. Upon completion of all testimony, the applicant will be allowed to make a closing statement to the Commission. Upon completion of the applicant's closing statement, I will entertain a motion from the Commission to close the public hearing on the request. The Commission reserves the right to ask questions of any member of the audience. However, we will not hear any unsolicited statements unless the public hearing is first reopened. Each speaker addressing this Commission shall step forward to the podium, state your name and address before proceeding with their testimony or evidence. This Commission shall not be bound by strict rules of evidence, but does reserve the right to exclude evidence or testimony that it may deem to be irrelevant, immaterial, incompetent, or unduly repetitious. As chairman, I will rule on all questions relating to the admissibility of evidence, which may be overruled by a majority of the Commission. Continuances may be granted by the Commission in case for good cause shown to any interested party who has entered their appearance. The Commission may request a continuance of a hearing for the purpose of giving notice, further notice, taking further evidence, gathering further information, touring the proposed site, or for such other reasons as the Commission may find sufficient. In such case, we shall state the specific reasons for the continuance and set a date, time, and place when the matter will be continued. All official actions of this Commission will be made at a public meeting by motion made, seconded, and a polling of the membership. If conditions are imposed, such conditions shall be included in the motion or amendment thereto. Our final decision will be prepared in writing and will be part of the public record of this Commission.
Motion to open public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. The public hearing is open. So we're going to look at case number ZTA 2023-04 and Pottawattamie County.
So this was a case that is being brought to you by us as the county in order to better align our zoning ordinance with some new language that they entered into for Iowa Code Chapter 335, which is the chapter of state code that allows counties to establish zoning in there. And in the staff report, you can see that we wanted to make sure that we add in a definition for agricultural experiences. And that would be agricultural experiences, any agricultural related activity as a secondary use in conjunction with agricultural production on a farm which the activity is open to the public and is intended for the purpose or promoting or educating the public about agriculture, agricultural practices, agricultural activities, or agricultural products. And then, continue on, underneath of that, section 8001.50, which is our agricultural uses exempt. We would be taking out section .02, which states currently, if a tract of land is less than 35 acres, it shall be presumed that that tract of land is not primarily used for agricultural purposes. And we would be replacing that with .02. Land enrolled in a soil or water conservation program shall be considered land primarily adapted for use for agricultural purposes. We'd be adding .04, which would be the factors which may be considered when determining whether land or structures are primarily used for agricultural purposes include, but are not limited to, the number of acres used for the agricultural activities, the nature of those agricultural activities, the financial input by the owner or occupant, the role of the occupant of the agricultural activities, the time spent engaged in these activities, and the income derived from agricultural activities. .05, which is another part to help us align with state code, is no conditional use permit, special use permit, special exemption, or variance shall be required for agricultural experiences on the property of which the primary use is agricultural production.
If we ask questions now right away.
You can.
The 35 acres thing, that kind of has me a little concerned. So you're saying anything less than 35 is not gonna be enrolled into ag?
So you are not zoning when we're looking at whether or not something is agriculturally exempt or not. You're not allowed to put a specific acreage test to it. So we have had people who own as little as 5 acres.
Yeah.
Come in and apply for an agricultural exemption. And for a building to park their machinery, and in doing so, they will submit to us land leases showing, yes, I own this 5 acres, but I'm farming 500 acres. And so I have machinery for 500 acres and they want a place to put it. So they'll apply for it and we'll grant them an agricultural exemption on that.
Why 35 though? Is that's what the state's saying too? Or that's
Well,
something
that's what we have today, right? And we're changing.
We have that in there. It used to be to where if the tract of land was less than 35 acres, it shall be presumed that it was not. Because if you had a 40-acre chunk of ground or 35 acres or more, it was just presumed that it's agriculture. So you didn't, and that was back in your zoning permit days, right? So you didn't have to come get a zoning permit.
Right.
Now, that's the only piece that gets exempted out for the permit. If it was in the floodplain development, you still have to get a floodplain development permit. You still have to get well permits. You still have to get septic permits. Nobody in the state of Iowa is exempt from those pieces to it.
So what about people that are currently zoned ag that are less than 35? Maybe they got a permit or whatever. I mean, are they gonna have to come in and reapply each year, or is it just, it's grandfathered in, or how? Cause there's a lot of people out there that have tracts of 20 that are farming. I don't wanna.
So that is where the primarily adapted to agriculture comes in, right? Is the use of the so it's two different things if we're talking about a building versus a house, right?
Yeah.
If you have a building and you have 15 acres to take care of, or you're gonna put some machinery in it, you're gonna put some horses in it or something like that, the building's primarily dedicated towards agriculture, you can get an farm exemption to construct that building there. But if you have 20 acres and you wanna build a pole barn and you wanna park your RV, your boat, your 4-wheelers, that's not primarily adapted to agriculture, you're gonna have to get a building permit for that. Now, somebody who comes in who owns 20 acres and they want an ag exemption to build a home, but they work in the city every day or have some other job that they're spending the majority of their time doing, the majority of their financial gains come from that. They are not gonna be ag exempt because they are not primarily adapted to agriculture. Now, they very well may have, and that's where we have to really consider those factors on how much of the time are you spending towards working the land, trying to produce a product to bring to market versus is it a hobby? Is it just a sideline activity to that? Which even that hobby and sideline activity very well may garner an ag exemption for a building. It's just not gonna garner you an ag exemption for home, for farmhouse. And on the ag experience pieces of it, because we do have people who wanna have agricultural experiences on there, and so I reached out to the state fire marshal's office and I asked, how are you dealing with the new agricultural experience pieces on these farms where people are wanting to have people come out and be in a building to serve, let's say, a farm dinner or something like that? And the state fire marshal's office says the act of having somebody out there for a farm experience and say you're serving a farm dinner, if you're outside on picnic tables, whatever, is fine. The minute you move them inside a building, that now becomes a public building, it has to get permitted and inspected in order to, because it's gotta meet, because you're now having the public there.
So like when some people in town here have a get-together in the county for Iowa Western, which they have once a year, you know about that. Well, or Jason James has one year. So since he's getting together in a building, that has to get special permit.
The building should be inspected to meet the codes of a public building.
And that's new,
Brother
right?
being the fire chief,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah, I forget. Well, no, that's Lewis Central there, yeah, right.
But that's the state fire marshal's.
So that's
take
new
on
then,
it.
right? This part's new?
This part is new, yeah, the ag
So
experience
how do
part
they
is
know
new.
about that? Going down, you know, like the average person in town or the county has those get-togethers and they think, well, I've never had this done before.
So I started reaching out to the Farm Bureau and talking to them to see if they would be willing to provide some education on those things, so that way it doesn't get too contentious. If people learn about it ahead of time, it's usually less of a contentious piece and they're planned for it in their farm experience or ag experience, whatever they wanna do. Versus we do have, we've had one person, Kevin, is it Novak? He does mushrooms up by Crescent. He had a big farm day. It was in the paper. He saw people sitting outside on picnic tables, you know, trying his mushrooms, learning about the mushrooms. That's a picture perfect agricultural experience day out there like that. It's just a minute of, we also then have the other side of it where people actually want to construct a building and say, you know, open a restaurant and say, well, it's farm dinner. And that's where.
You mean like a restaurant type
Like a
thing?
restaurant.
Like, that apple orchard out, right?
Yeah, so
Dittmer's.
Dittmer's has his building out there on his apple orchard. And whenever he goes to do something to his building, he gets a permit from us. Because it's a public building, he has customers coming in.
Including customers to come in a certain amount, or does he have to apply for that each time, or is it just a blanket for the whole duration?
No, we do a load for the building,
Okay.
an occupant load for the building. Now, his was constructed at a point in time, pre-building codes and things, so there's a production area, and we've done this in other, so like say the goat cheese facility, pieces of it, or even a winery, you can take a winery part of it. The ag production portion of the building is ag exempt and does not get inspected. But then you have your front-facing customer side to where it does have to get in building codes and building permitted and make sure it meets ADA standards and all that, and fire codes. So we split those buildings and we'll say, okay, well, there's not any inspections that happen on this part of it. It's not getting permitted. That is your ag production area. This is your customer area. It does get a building permit issued and goes through the inspection process.
But like a party, like in a building on a farm, like Jason, I'm using as an example. So you have 50 or 100 people, he's gonna have to have a special permit to do that once a year.
You could need a special permit, but yeah,
And even if it's not ag related, it's
which would be
donation related to Iowa.
temporary assemblages of large people.
Okay, I get you, just like what we talked about a few months ago, I get you.
Yeah, so explain that. If you were having an event at your farm, what kind of threshold is it before you'd need a special?
If it's an ag experience, there is no threshold. You could have as many, you could have 3,000 people out there. And
It's not though,
Yeah, but they gotta have like,
300, I think.
I mean, all the other porta potties and you know, they have to fall into all the same kind of things you have at a
So
concert
that's the
or
part
something?
where we try to keep that open relationship with them. And I would talk to the Farm Bureau, because we would want them, we want the vets to be successful, but there does reach a certain point, and I said, we've gotten really good at working even with West Fair on this aspect of it, right? To say, and Ditmer's Orchard, they do it as well. If we know that there's gonna be a big event, and we know we're gonna have traffic concerns, and so we can meet with the sheriff's department, we can meet with the environmental health folks and say, how long is the duration of the event? How many porta potties should you have available? Do we need to have traffic enforcement out there? Well, we cannot grant you a permit based on what the state is saying. We would still want to have those meetings to make sure that you have a successful event and that the public can get in and out safe.
But it's exempt if it's farm related, right? Agriculture. So it means, you're showing off John Deere equipment and you have a hog roast pertaining to, hey, show and tell of John Deere equipment, as an example.
Could be.
What's an example where it wouldn't be? Agriculture related, as a,
Well, okay, so take, Ditmer's has his apple orchard out there, right? But then he also does his bluegrass music festival.
okay,
He comes in and he gets a special permit for his bluegrass music
Okay, I
festival,
get
and
you.
then he does his hot air balloons. Now, at the same time, you're out there, you're experiencing an apple orchard. They have all the apple orchard things available to that person who comes out there, but there's a bluegrass music festival going on. There's a hot
That's
air
where you
balloon
do.
piece of it going on.
okay, I
That's,
get you.
so there's those layered pieces that usually.
It's
wind
not
up happening. But if you have
agricultural,
like Karsten's, isn't there a Karsten's Farm Days? Personally, I've never been to it, but I hear it's a great thing, and that,
Doesn't need anything even going inside the building, right?
ag experience.
I mean, are we having issues with this? I guess that, I mean, is there a problem out there?
We've had a
Like,
group.
why add this language at all? Like, why?
So there was a group of residents, should say there was one resident that approached the county with a letter and, stating that they feel on multiple occasions, that we illegally denied agricultural exemptions. They listed a number of residents on the back of it. And I have a voicemail from one of those residents who emphatically denies the fact and is very upset that his name is even on this letter. So I disregard basically everything that was written in this letter, because if that's the way that this resident wants to go, then I don't feel as though you can issue false statements to the Board of Supervisors, knowingly put false names down on it, and then think we're gonna take anything that you say
Yeah.
to credence on there. But state code did change during COVID-19, and we should update our zoning ordinance to meet up with what state code has and get ahead of the agricultural experience pieces of it, because we are getting more and more people coming in wanting to do agricultural experiences, and what does that entail? So it'd be better to have it listed out in our zoning ordinance now than to come into more conflicts with it.
So, let's say a guy does one without a permit, doesn't do anything with this, and then your office has enforcement on it. What happens? What kind of fine do they get, or do they just have to pay permit fees to get it later, or what? How does that work?
Well, if it's deemed to be ag exempt, then nothing would happen.
So I think
If
like
it's-
fireworks, for example, we're supposed to get permits to have gatherings and fireworks, but we all well know that does not happen, and there's huge gatherings everywhere. So, and we don't really enforce it, so I'm trying to understand the point, I get, like, let's match state code, but if we're not gonna enforce this, why are we doing it?
We do enforce it, though. We enforce the determination of whether or not you're ag exempt. It goes before, in the determination, so you all would not see a lot of that, and you wouldn't have, because any challenges to the determination of ag exempt goes to the zoning board of adjustment. So if somebody comes in and tries and files for an ag exemption, I were to make the determination that it's not ag exempt, and I issue that letter to them saying, and that it's not ag exempt, which I have done before, and the person owned 120 acres, they weren't ag exempt for what they wanted to do. That challenge then goes to the zoning board of adjustment.
Yeah.
Zoning board of adjustment, they get, the resident at that time gets to come in and lay out their case for why they feel like they're ag exempt. I get to state my case as though why it doesn't meet the primarily adapted to agricultural terms of it, and then the zoning board of adjustment then gets to decide, well, is the resident correct or am I correct? And then that challenge afterwards, say either they side with me, so the resident decides to appeal that, it goes to district court.
So what's the dollar fine? Do we set it?
If we are to find somebody, it's not a specific fine just to this section, but if we do issue a fine, it's a $750 infraction of county code.
And what's the permit, if you wanted to get a permit, what would that cost?
Well, building permit fees range on the valuation of the building or size of the building.
No, to have this, event.
But you can't utilize a building that wasn't permitted, you can't have. a
Right, but you
public
can get it
unit.
inspected, right? Or not even do that?
Well, that's done during construction.
You could retroactively have somebody come in.
Right, so that
Yeah,
building.
if I buy a farm that has a building on it and I wanna have an ag experience, you're saying I can't do that?
You can with ag, right?
You can't just not in the building. You
Why
can't,
not? Why couldn't I come to you and have you inspect it?
because we didn't permit it.
Well, that don't make any sense.
So it was built without a
You would
permit.
have to-
So hold
you
on,
could
I
have
can
an-
build a new one on the same property and do it, but I can't use the one that's already on my farm? That makes 0 sense.
You could, but you're gonna have to come in and get a permit to renovate it. Because
Okay,
if it was constructed, you're gonna have to get an interior renovation because it's not going to meet any of the fire codes that state fire marshal's office want you to meet. It's not gonna have exit
we
signs.
don't know that
It's
though.
not gonna
I
have,
mean, it could.
it could, but I
I
would,
mean, the guy that had it before me okay, what if I buy a property that's already been that way before? Like, so say that building was already an ag experience.
then it just
Does it
carries on.
does it carry over to the
Yeah.
new owner? Okay.
It's like that, wedding thing event, old barn, right? On
Yeah,
92.
Highway 92, perfect example.
Right,
So they had to get I haven't been in there, they remodeled it and turned it
They
into.
got permits.
They got
And
permits.
Zone commercial, that's not an egg experience.
Oh, they got a zone commercial before they could,
yeah, the palace, yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Buckingham's totally renovated that from the ground up and doing a
but
event
if you,
center.
but back to what he's saying, if you're ag experience, existing building, you can't have the event inside that because it's not permitted when it was built. So all the event has to be outside in a tent or in the open, right?
Right, it wouldn't meet the fire codes.
Okay.
I think we need.
So is there a certain, with the ag experiences, is there a certain frequency that is? I mean, it could, if they had a vineyard and were doing wine tastings in a permitted building or
You could have a farm tour every day.
every day of hundreds, without it being zoned for any commercial activity or?
Correct.
Although vineyards, if they're going to have like weddings or
Yeah, I mean, there's
special
other,
events,
yeah.
there is in the zoning ordinance, I think it's 25 per year at a vineyard, right?
If they're doing like an event, if they're just doing their wine tastings of their product, then it's.
No limitation.
I was kind of taking the vineyard out of it, but yes, you're correct. And for special events and vineyards, there's a whole section in the code about that part of it.
So here's another example. High school graduation, 200 people, and put it out in the machine shop. Can't technically have it.
But that's not an
It's not an ag.
No, I mean, even without the ag
How do
experience.
you know? I mean, I'm
Well,
looking
no,
right
I'm
inside your
just
tractor.
saying, say I want to have my son's graduation party in my building.
Yeah.
That's
But you have to have a special
totally
permit,
different
right?
than
No.
what.
a public event?
Yeah, technically. Graduation.
It's invite only.
I think it's a party.
No, I think we're talking, I mean, you're getting private parties mixed up a little bit with that, yeah.
Like open public,
Mm.
so the masses could
Yes.
show up instead of like a set list.
Right, because
Okay.
you could have a family
Clarified.
reunion and the Larsons could, all 1,000 of the Larsons could show up at your place.
Okay.
And
I get you.
But we have had businesses before try to come in and say, well, it was a family gathering. And it's like, no, it was an event for, it's pretty obvious it was an event versus
Okay.
your family reunion sort of things.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that would like to give testimony? Please come forward.
My name's Teresa Troxel. Call me Terry. I'm one of the people on that signed that form for Keep House. I'm fifth generation Crescent, Iowa. My dad graduated after World War II from Iowa State, and in electrical and chemical computer engineering, got hired by IBM, and I spent my life going coast to coast and always coming back to Pottawattamie County and Crescent. And I love Iowa, and I love Crescent. I bought from my uncle, Corgomic, 25 acres, and then across the way, my husband and I purchased 80 acres. We had 105 in total. I have a vegetable farm, organic vegetable farm, and it's in 2 locations. And I'm a member of an Iowa organization called Practical Farmers of Iowa, which is extremely helpful for many people who want to come back to the land. My family has always had vegetable gardens. I have always had vegetable gardens, so that when we retired, I knew I was going to want to have a vegetable garden business. So they wouldn't let me retire, but my husband was retired, and he spent many a day talking to K-Mocha. And I know that we built 2 sheds, and my home, I do not believe, I think everything was ag exempt. And the land is still in ag. I was delighted to hear that prairie restoration projects that we're actively involved with Hitchcock and Chad Gravy. I think that program, I am very proud of Pottawattamie County for all of its progressive work in trying to preserve the Loess Hills and in monitoring this kind of activity. I think it's a very responsible thing to do. I was at a Practical Farmers meeting. Subsequently, I have sold to family members 25 acres to my brother that was part of the Yeoman land, and 40 acres to my cousin, Dan Kelly. He's the guy with the airport. So I have an airport, I have a plane, landing and taking off very infrequently, but it does. And I've lost my husband. He was a pilot, a private pilot. He strongly supported what Dan wanted to do, and I strongly support that activity so that he. As part of Practical Farmers, they have a lot of field days, and so they recruit people. You do trials to try and make yourself a better farmer. Heavens knows I need help to be in the black. I've been in the black every year, but it's pretty shaky. And I have had field days where they come to one of the sheds that we have, which is it has a bathroom in it. It has a concrete floor, but no heating, and so we use it. We've got a place people can go to the bathroom if they're working out in the field. And when I've had events, there's probably been 30 people there learning how to save tomato seeds. So it's kind of like a class. There is no money exchanged. I actually do end up getting a payment for doing that from Practical Farmers. And it's trying to build a community that is statewide. Through Practical Farmers, over the last weekend, I was at an event where they were trying to let us know about all the money that's available to us to improve our practice as farmers. And I talked to someone from Solon County who, about 10 years ago, there was a big effort. There was a big discussion about changing exactly this, what is an ag exemption and who qualifies to use it, and why do you qualify to use it? The take home that I got is what they were worried about was the acre size. That was the primary thing. There was no debate over what was a public event and what wasn't a public event. But that you could have these kinds of events like Practical Farmers promotes, and there's other organizations that kind of promote that kind of thing. They ended up taking it down to 10 acres. And I believe the reason that Solon County compromised going from a higher acreage down to a smaller acreage is, so I was talking to Melvin Hauser about this, and I know Melvin because he was very involved for several years with some Iowa West money, trying to develop local programs to have people growing food, not food for livestock, but food for people. And with our proximity to Omaha, there are a lot of young people who want to do that. And it's very difficult to find land on which to do it. And I understand from Melvin, the Loess Hills are protected, and I'm proud of that. I'm grateful. But for some reason, I think I understand a 40-acre parcel can be divided. It can have 2 houses on a 40-acre parcel, and the largest parcel size is 2.5 acres for a house, but all of that has to go through you guys. But I can visualize having a 40-acre parcel that has a larger parcel that is still pretty much an ag, and then some other person wanting on a smaller parcel to have the house, to have the shed for equipment and handling, and also it's still, the household income could be at least augmented by something like that. So that is my input is I'd be nervous about making it too small, because I think there could be smaller acreages where we want these people to move to Pottawattamie County. They're good people, and they are passionate about growing their food. So that is my only comment. I really think you should be considering, and I actually think that was the alarm bell on Heath, was that, I don't know how big his acreage is, but this is a really good guy. He's a retired naval pilot. I think he's one of those guys that lands he's a fighter pilot. He's one of these guys that lands on an aircraft carrier. And his wife is one of the top baby doctors in Omaha. She's at Methodist, where if you weren't gonna have a baby, Methodist is where you wanna go have your baby. Well, we have a Methodist hospital here. Methodist has been working like crazy when they move into their house so that he can fulfill his farming dream. That Methodist she doesn't want to come there because she's not thinking that she's going to have the support. Methodist is reworking to try and get her, and I think they may have gotten her down here now. So my point is, I think that the reason he's got so upset is that he maybe doesn't have the 35 acres. And I can see there's gonna be a lot of heaths. This is exactly the kind of people we want coming into our community, along with having siblings of people who already live here, who wanna do something like that. That's my comment.
Thank you.
But we're taking the 35 acres out, right?
Yeah, you can.
Shit.
I'm Kristen Brocker, I'm one of the assistant county attorneys, and I worked with Matt and Pam to kind of help develop the verbiage for the ordinance. I just wanted to clarify something so that the board knows and the public knows. In removing the 35 acre limit, we're removing the presumption that anything under 35 acres is not ag. So we open the door to, other options for proving ag or showing how the 2 acres or the 5 acres or the 10 acres are engaged in agriculture activities. So, and that both, I think, solves some of the problems that we might have been having or we might have in the future, and it puts us in line with the state's requirement or the state statute, which says that you cannot use a number of acres to determine what is ag and not. So we're taking that out completely, so we're not,
Sure.
Contradicting anything in the statute, and, we're giving ourselves more opportunity to look at things on a case-by-case basis. So I just wanted to clarify that, so that
Good.
there's no confusion, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you guys have.
Well, I think I'm with you on the doing that piece with the land size, but I guess where I'm concerned is I'm worried about your office determining what someone's doing for ag and what they're not. So like if I work here in town, but I do ag-related things in my career, who are you to determine whether or not my income is coming from my property or whether it's coming from my employer? Like that you kind of said something like that earlier, and that's a non-starter at my point, because I feel like that's way overreach.
So,
So we don't mess with income tax at the county level.
you're correct, that's a good point. So I went down to the Farm Bureau, right? Because how do you define a farmer?
Mhm.
Who better to ask than the Farm Bureau? So we go down, we have a good relationship, so I went down to the Farm Bureau and had a meeting with them and with their board. And I asked them, I asked the group that was there, it was a good mix of individuals, and said, how can you tell me how I can define a farmer? Number one, and it was funny, because the number one thing that they all said was, make them show you the Schedule F. That's all, the first thing they said, make them show you the Schedule F. And I go, well, that's great, we're not allowed to ask for that. We're not allowed to ask for your Schedule F. Now, on our ag exemption form, it was optional for them to provide their Schedule F if they want to. You can provide your Schedule F, you can mark it all off just to show that you file one. So then they also came up with, they go, well, the USDA has a definition out there that if you sell a certain amount of produce per year, they classify you as a farmer. And then another gentleman suggested, he goes, when I go down and I buy my new tractor, he goes, every time I go down to buy a new tractor, they ask me, they're like, hey, are you a farmer? And I'm like, yes, and they have you sign a slip. So we're working on better ways to, how do we look at the whole picture to say, are you a farmer or not? Because, so I've had some HVAC work done, right? Guys come in, put a new furnace, new air conditioner on. But they're farmers. Two brothers, they own an HVAC company, and during the rest of the year, when their crops are in the fields and they got things going, they go out and they do new installs or repairs for HVAC. But then when harvest time comes, they're out, they're hitting the fields, and they let people on the HVAC side, they're like, listen, if you call, we may or may not be there, because if we gotta get the crops out, we gotta get the crops out. And so there's all kinds of good examples. I mean, there's doctors, there's lawyers, there's all kinds of people that do those kind of things. So we have to look at the entire picture of it and say, are you primarily adapted to agriculture, or is this just your hobby?
Without like a good legal definition of that, I mean, I'm concerned that
That's the nature of it, yeah.
it's a gray area that you can say you're not a farmer, and then now we have to go through all this whole legal process later. Turns out they might be a farmer. I just worry that that's gonna create some situations we don't wanna be in.
Can I?
Go ahead.
And one of the other things that I wanted to make sure that we all know, it's not just the person who's asking for the exemption, it's the primary purpose of the land that the, exempt building or the exemption applies to. So, I'm a lawyer, if I've got, 20 acres of row crop out in Beebytown area, that is still a farm, whether or not my primary income is lawyering. So if you look at you can use the income, like what our language is giving us the opportunity to do. You can use the income if that would, weigh in your favor, but you don't have to just look at the income or the primary income of the person asking. You can be an attorney
We
who
can't
also
even ask at
has-
our level though.
Well,
I mean, until the board goes and starts collecting income tax from people, it doesn't matter. We can't ask that. They can voluntarily,
Yeah,
Give it to
they
us
can
if they
voluntarily
want.
give it, and
but most
so,
farmers are gonna give you the middle finger and try to get off their land. And I'm just being honest with you, because it's none of your business to them, And so I worry that if you're gonna define who's a farmer and who's not, I get your point about the land, like if that's primarily used for ag purposes, well, there's people that own thousands of acres out there that don't live here and they live in Colorado and they're just chilling. But I
absolutely.
mean, they're still farmers, and they still get, so I just, a little nervous about defining that at our level. It's like that piece I'm not okay with, that's just me though, so, I mean, everything else makes sense, but.
Well, and we have had, we've had new individuals into agriculture who, they come in and they, maybe their parents chopped them off a 2-acre piece of ground and they're gonna build their house, wanna get an ag exemption on it. And they have written a letter stating about how, hey, I'm just getting my farming operation going, secured, 500 acres in land leases, 100 acres in land leases. They show us those land leases. Well, I mean, you're gonna spend the majority of your time working that land, you're a farmer. So you get your ag exemption for your house.
Okay.
Well, I feel better knowing that, public portions of an ag experience do need to still follow the codes and the regulations. So that was the question that I had, as I was coming in. But understanding that those public areas are being protected for the public makes me feel much more comfortable. Any other discussion? Is there a motion? Oh, maybe I have to close the public hearing first.
I'll make a motion, go ahead.
Motion.
I'll make a motion to close public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. The public hearing's closed. Any more discussion, or if not, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion
Okay. What is your motion?
Approve or deny.
approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any more discussion?
My only caution is just that I don't feel like you have a clear definition of farmer. And I'm concerned that that's gonna bring about issues for the county in your office. So I mean, that's like the only piece I think I'm hung up on personally on this. Otherwise, I think, removing that language about the 35 acres, I think that's actually beneficial. Cause then someone that has a smaller piece, it opens the door, like you said. So I mean, that's actually a good thing to me. But the other piece about I don't mean you, I'm just meaning the county determining whether or not someone's a farmer or not, I just feel like that's a little dangerous for us, so. For what it's worth.
I guess I would say we've done several egg exemptions, and I would say 99% of the farmers had no issues providing us with any information. And I'll use Jungie, the Little Produce. For his hoop buildings, he did not have to provide income, and we determined he was egg exempt for his hoop buildings. The income portion, I believe, is just for the house.
Yeah, well, I mean, the board of supervisors has the power to collect income tax, and I hope we never do that, but if they do, then we have every right to ask for it.
Mhm.
But we don't, so I don't feel like there's any business of us knowing that unless they willingly give it to us.
Right. And that's what I'm saying, we don't
They do not
require
have
that.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's public about their land anyway. I mean, obviously, they have to submit things to the state to determine the value of their property based on their bushels per acre, all that fun stuff. I mean, I get that there's stuff we can get out there to find out, but when you get to, like what she's talking with large vegetable gardens, well, she's not telling you how many bushels of particular produce that we're necessarily getting. She doesn't necessarily have to report that to us, so. But I don't know. I just see a whole community coming in here with pitchforks, and I'm just worried about that happening, so. That's just me.
I've had 3 different challenges to ag exemption determinations, and I've been successful at every one of them.
I've never
In how
questioned
many
your
years?
ability, Matt. I hope you know that.
I think it,
So,
well, I know it's just when it comes down to who's primarily adapted to agriculture and who's not, it really is pretty obvious in the end when you're dedicated. You know, the Troxels out there, I met her and her husband when they first came back into the area, and they were going for their organic piece of, I don't know if you call it like your organic seal for IV, and we were doing all the different water testings.
I forgot about that.
Yes, so, we work with these people all the time to try to help, you know, and that's a state grant program, it just operates through our office. So we're already working with them in different capacities before they even get to a point where they come in and they're like, you know, hey, I'm gonna apply for this ag exemption.
Or Long Walk Farms, is that what that's called?
Yes.
Tiffany,
out there.
20 acres, but
Yes.
clearly exempt.
Doing a self-pick, vegetable garden style thing. Sharon Omek with the,
Okay.
you know, originally it was the dairy up there, and then it moved to Stanley Snack Shack and the Feldmans when they built their dairy up there. And I mean, Jana would bring us cheese all the time. I love that. I love goat cheese stuff. So I wish they'd both be very successful at it. But
So Sharon's a good example though of her activities on the farm were egg experiences, the goat yoga, etc. But then Stanley Shack, clearly a commercial activity, even though some of the produce was being utilized in Stanley's Shack. But
I have one other question. I'm sorry to keep belaboring this, but let's just say I started a distillery. Can I turn that into an ag experience? Or is that clearly defined enough that it's not?
Board has chosen not to define that at this point in time.
Okay.
Yet, so where was it? You know, the distillery code went ahead of them, but it's dead in the water right now.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. A roll call vote.
Chapman,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Schultz,
Nay.
Silkworth,
Yes.
Leaders.
Yes.
Motion carries. Is there any other business?
No other business tonight.
What about in December? Having anything?
no applications.
Good.
All right. Do we have a motion to
Motion
adjourn?
to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.